Hello all, this is Dr. Dave Masnack talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3, and in this particular video, I want to talk to you about how to actually write a literature review for a research paper. So if you don't know me, I am an associate professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There are so many people that help me out that I want to pay the favor for it and help you out. So we created, we built out this sharing economy editing platform. That's what reciprocity.com is. And then we started doing a bunch of blog stuff. And then we've got this huge YouTube channel all about dealing with stuff and research and, having confidence in yourself. There's all sorts of stuff in terms of being a good leader in the world around you. But enough about that. Let's talk about how to actually write a research paper or a literature review for a research paper, because I think this is really important for a lot of you that are in graduate school at this moment. So the key to writing a research paper is always, and making sure that it's very successful, is making sure that you have a great story within the research. And you will see papers that do extremely well, they often have this story behind it, and it's really communicating something to the outside world. It's not just about, taking a deep dive in the literature and kind of regurgitating everything that you had found and the results that you had found. That's not at all doing a great justice for what a research paper is all about. There's a lot of storytelling. There's a lot of writing that's involved in terms of trying to make sense of what it is. And the literature review is the moment where you're setting up why your hypothesis or why your study is actually really important. Why hasn't been discovered before? What is going on behind there? So, here are some key tips, I think, in terms of thinking about a literature review before you actually jump into it and what you're trying to do. So the first thing that I would want you to think about is to really focus on the storytelling and what you're trying to communicate. And so having, maybe it is a framework in your mind of what this actually looks like, what is the overall purpose of what you're trying to write about, having that written down or in your mind is really going to help in terms of what you're trying to communicate. So it's not just about writing as much as you can. It is about communicating the story to other people in the world around you, to your audience. Those are going to be your reviewers. Maybe it is the person that's actually, maybe it's a teacher or a professor or something like that, but you're really trying to communicate some sort of story to the rest of the world. Now, your literature review, a lot of people get this wrong, including myself. I took many years to figure this out, and it wasn't until the last few years I'm like, oh yeah, I get it now. So it's going to be, the second thing is going to be about the dependent variable and really thinking about and describing how the dependent variable, or the thing that you're trying to explain, what that actually looks like. And so you're going to jump into, maybe it's the mechanisms as explaining, so you're going to define that dependent variable or that construct that you actually have, really define what it is, really get into maybe some of the mechanisms in terms of what people have explained it with, and jumping into that. That's where the theory comes into an important, that's where it really matters, is when you're talking about, what people have done. The other thing is so the third thing that I think is really important is being sufficient, right? So it's not covering everything in the literature. That's impossible to do. We know that as researchers, if you've done this for a long time, you can't cover everything. There's page limits, but not only that, there is just so much you can explore and so many dimensions that you can explore. So what you're looking for is kind of a sufficiency to see that you've actually covered the most appropriate literature. And you don't need to cite everything, but you need to cover things as much as you can. And I know that's kind of a tricky thing to do, and there's a balance in terms of how much you cite and how much you actually take a dive into this. But what you're looking for is this balance between making sure it's very sufficient in terms of what you're actually having the literature review about, that you're covering all the main topics, but at the same time, you're not overwhelming people with citations, and that becomes a real tricky balance. I have some videos on citations if you want to look at those, and you can really take a deep dive into that. Now, the fourth thing that I think is incredibly important is the rigor, and making sure that you're focusing on good or relevant literature, right? So it's not just sufficient, but it's rigorous in what you're trying to do, and you're trying to demonstrate to other people that you know the literature that is rigorous or that's within the field that makes a lot of sense with what you're trying to do. So really taking a deep dive and taking that rigor seriously. And often it means cutting out citations that weren't in good journals or good enough journals, whatever that is in your domain. Really focusing on that in terms of communicating rigor to other people. I know it's tricky. I don't like that component of it, but at the same time, we only have a certain number of pages, and that's what's going on here, is you only have a certain number of pages to communicate these things, and that's why it's really, you have to be very, very tight, and I think it's becoming more tighter. You know, the literature reviews and how we write is becoming much more stronger as, you know, we advance in science and scientific domain. The other thing, so the fifth thing is really making sure it's exciting, it's super fun to read, and people are like, oh, this is really cool. I don't know how you actually got to this moment. And they're wanting to learn more all throughout the paper that you're writing. And I know that's hard to do in science, but the more that you can communicate that this is really exciting, this is fun, and that this is engaging, the more that the reviewers are going to, and the readers are going to be enticed to carry forward and actually read the darn thing. That's hard to do, getting people to actually read the darn paper. And so if you can get people to do that, you can really advance the not only the review process and, you know, getting people on your side, but also later on, as we get better, or as you get your paper cited and stuff, it becomes much more cited because people understand what you're talking about and they want to read it and they're engaged and they're having fun with it. A sixth thing that is really important, and it's going to depend on your field, and I don't want you to copy exactly what other people said, but I want you to mimic what other people said. So that's a really important dimension in terms of what you're trying to do, is looking to see what the patterns, what people do and how they write in certain, certain journals. You might look at the best articles in those journals and see how they're actually setting things up, and really look at mimicking. You'll learn a lot by mimicking what other people do and the language that they do, and sort of changing it to fit what you're investigating and taking a deep dive into that. And you're going to get so much more oomph to what you're doing. So you got to mimic the cadence and the pattern of what they're writing. So there is a pattern to almost every paper in terms of what you're doing along the way. And then the other thing, so the seventh thing that I think is incredibly important for all of us to think about, it's not writing in the sense that you're just writing everything down. It's writing in the sense that you're anticipating what people are going to say and think about. So this is, like a good novelist or a good author, you're really thinking about, okay, what is somebody going to say here? What are they going to think here? What are they anticipating? And so you're really thinking about these complaints or these concerns before they actually do it. And if you weave it into what you're doing in terms of this, that there is limitations, there is problems, but, this is how we deal with it in this paper, or, other people have seen these problems, this is how we might explore it, really taking a deep dive into these complaints and concerns what people are having. You really can navigate a lot of issues before you actually even get to the results or what you're actually trying to do. So you can use your literature review all the way through in terms of thinking about how to address complaints and issues that reviewers and other people are going to have, and really thinking about what it is in terms of framing and making it so people will not get hung up on a certain aspect of what you're trying to do. That's tricky, and it takes a lot of practice. People that are good at it can get it right off the get-go, but it's an essential part of how we actually write papers, is thinking about these complaints or mitigating complaints before they actually get done. before somebody actually raises those complaints. If you're a reviewer and you're going through and you're thinking in your mind like, I don't like this, and then somebody actually writes it right like the next paragraph or the next couple of sentences, you're like, oh wow, that's pretty good. I don't have that complaint anymore. I get it. So that's it. I think in terms of writing a literature review for a research paper, really important, focus on that dependent variable. Get into not all the literature, but the most important literature. And that's going to be a tricky thing for you to balance and think about, but you're really thinking about sufficiency and rigor as you're doing that, as how much you actually should be writing, how much you should be taking a deep dive in these things, really getting at, one or two theories, no more than two theories in a particular domain. Maybe you talk about different mechanisms in terms of how things actually work, but you're trying to explain it within those particular theories of what you're trying to do. So that theoretical focus is critical to get through the review process often. And you don't want too many theories all over the place. It really seems scattered and you can't explain what's going on. And then the other thing is, and how you're going to get that feel is looking at mimicking what other people are doing within that particular domain. So you can create an exciting, really cool paper before anybody has any complaints with it. So mitigating those complaints before they actually happen. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if you don't like it. I'll blame it on my dog who's sitting over here if you don't like it. But anyways, give me a thumbs up. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.